It's just about 8 minutes after 7 o'clock here on First Up, the first stop in your busy day, and it's time for your quote of the day today. It comes from Robert Frost, a renowned poet, and he says, quote, in 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. I think that needs to become a personal mantra for many of us out here. And we want to segue now from that very profound quote to meet a very amazing human being. We're speaking with now internationally renowned journalist Jim Clancy. You've seen his face on the CNN, you've heard his opinions, you've seen his hard-hitting journalistic style, and now he's here on the set with us on First Up, and I'm going to have a Willy moment right now. Jim Clancy is on our set. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Jess.
Welcome. Welcome. It's a pleasure having you in Trinidad Tobago.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here. My first trip to Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm really liking it in terms of the people especially. But the weather's been good. You know, nothing to complain about. We've had a great meeting of international journalists from dozens of countries all coming together here in Trinidad and Tobago over the last 4 days. Been a lot of fun. Met the Prime Minister last night. We've had a good run here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Clancy, one of the statements that you made during your presentation yesterday is that journalists need to understand what it means to take on the job, what it means to carry the mantle journalist, that you're not supposed to be doing it for money or for fame, but because you understand your responsibility is an almost sacred one. Share some more thoughts with us on that.
Well, you know, journalism today has become, and we were talking about this in the break, it's become something like becoming celebrities. You know, why should I be here on television with you? I'm a journalist. I tell stories. And I think too much so, it's become that way. And the media is partly responsible for it, yes, but we as journalists have to look at it. What is our job really? It is to tell stories, but it's to tell all sides of the story. It's to give voice to the voiceless people. It's to go out there and find the things in our communities and our countries that could be improved if we put a light on it and ask people to help. That's what our job really is. And that's what's the most rewarding thing. The rest of it is just we're roiling our lives and running around with makeup on and you know, trying to, you know, set a bella figura, and it doesn't work. It's not satisfying.
Let's talk about the evolution of media, the fourth estate, and what it was. You started so many years ago, you know, and the changes you've seen in media with the advent of 24-hour news cable, what that meant for how media has changed and how journalism has changed. Now, the principle of journalism remained the same, but how people practice it or the interpretation of it sometimes can be called into question.
You know, when I was very young, they used to have the National Association of Broadcasters, and these were stations, and they were required to do this for their license. They had to produce so much news every day because that was considered to be the public service. What is broadcasting? What is a broadcasting license? It's a license to print money out of nothing because you're selling that airtime for advertising dollars. You're making something out of nothing. Yes, you have to be clever, but there's very few industries where you don't have to buy anything in order to sell it and make a lot of money. And what's happened is I think today people have given up. The station owners, the media owners, a lot of them are being driven by the corporate profits, and they want to recover those profits. They want to earn more and more profits without the dedication to, you're there for the public service. That's what this is about. It isn't about your bottom line. It's about public service.
But do you think that there's a way to have a win-win situation there where you have the pretty bottom line, but you also, you know, fulfill your mandate to the public?
Of course. You know, the brilliance of my former boss, Ted Turner, was that he started the 24-hour news model. Now, in the past, it was always thought that you know, other programming had to pay for news because news is expensive to do. And other programming had to pay for sports because sports is expensive to do. What Ted Turner did with the 24-hour news cycle was he proved you could sell information. And that's why 24-hour news is so imitated today. And can it be of service? Certainly. Certainly it can. And it gives people the convenience of being able to go to their television set or turn on their radio, and they get news at their convenience when they want it.
Let's talk about statements you made at the conference, which should have every journalist in Trinidad and Tobago, across the Caribbean, and quite frankly across the world, thinking about objectivity, about the mandate for telling both sides of the stories, even with the temptations to go for the money, to go for the partisan type reporting where you report on one side at the expense of the other side, and how important it is to check sources and to tell those two sides of the stories and allow the public to make up their minds and just give the facts.
It's changed, and the challenge for all of us as journalists today is we have several trends that are going on that take responsibility away from us. Picking one side and advocating for that side is not journalism.
It's
it may
lobbying.
be television, it may be media, but it's not journalism. It's all sides of the story. If I favor someone, I should be bending over backwards to make sure that I'm being fair to the person that I don't like politically, just to make sure that I have that balance, seeking it out. How many times do people just give their opinion without placing a phone call to the person that they're talking about to get their side of the story?
And with that said, how is the public to differentiate now with these new trends in terms of what's an op-ed, what's someone's opinion, as opposed to what is a fact and what a journalist is reporting? Because those lines are so blurred now.
They are blurred. They are blurred because we don't identify analysis. We don't identify perspective. What we do instead is we put it all out there. And then we have people in the United States very politically polarized. And yet what they love to say on their programs is that this is journalism. No, it's not. It's not journalism at all. And it's a problem for the public. I think the public senses it. And I think that's one of the reasons that the news media has such low ratings and low esteem, is that people aren't being journalists. They're being something else and calling themselves journalists. And we need to wake up.
Mr. Clancy, do you think that there is room, or that it's all right for journalists, for media to champion particular causes, to say that they come down on this side of a particular issue? And I'm pointing to the Freedom Project that CNN has, and the fact that you have, the organization has come out and said modern day slavery is wrong, human trafficking is wrong, and we are going to do everything in our power to make people aware of this evil thing and do our best to bring an end to it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because as you started your question, I was going to say the Freedom Project is your classic case in point of advancing a cause. And I'm proud to say that I had a lot to do with that. Mm-hmm. I had a lot to do with even saying that you can't do this as a series that lasts 3 weeks. Let's work on this for a year. Now we've extended it beyond a year, because it is important. We talk about the drug dealers, and Mexico is going to be voting this weekend to whether or not they're going to go in a different direction in this so-called war on drugs that's been disastrous for the country and hasn't stopped the flow of drugs at all. But these guys are in it for the money. These narco traffickers are in it for the money. There's so much more money to be made from human trafficking. When you sell drugs, they go across the border, you're done with them. You've sold your product, you've taken huge risks. But when you sell people, you take very little risk. Fewer than 1% of all human traffickers are ever prosecuted. Plus, the beauty of it is you can sell this person over and over and over again, and the profits can keep coming for everybody that's involved in the chain. They're getting involved in human trafficking. We as the news media, at least from my perspective, it's not only good for journalism, but it's good for our society to open our eyes and see what's happening. There are more slaves around the world today than there ever have been in history. And who among us would believe that? Unless we saw the hard facts in front of us.
And part of the Freedom Project is to tell that story, to bring awareness to this heinous crime.
And hopefully make people aware, make laws change. There's not even, in the United States, it's pathetic. With all this war on drugs that we've been talking about, yes, it's a problem in our inner cities, in our suburbs. But the problem of human trafficking, there's just a handful of people, police officers, who specialize in it. It's really shocking, the little attention that we've given this problem.
From your interactions in the last couple of days at the conference, what do you see as the major challenges facing Caribbean journalists, Trinidad Tobago journalists, or are they at all different to the challenges facing global journalists?
Well, you know, they feel isolated, obviously. They feel underpaid. They feel overworked. And this is normal. I think the challenge for a lot of people is finding that right path of examining all sides of a story, listening to every person who has a voice there, and really considering it, taking it in, including it in your reports. Instead of making it one man is talking about one side, one journalist is talking about another side. We should be bringing the conversation together.
And how should media houses assist in helping journalists do their job vis-a-vis training? Because one of the things you mentioned during the conference is the importance of investing in the human capital. That training is critical in people honing their crafts and developing.
Well, it is critical, and people need to be reminded of that. People need to be reminded, even the veterans. It always helps. It's one of the reasons I like coming to the International Press Institute, to renew, you know, some of my perspective in journalism. And I think that the media houses have to see their responsibility to help their young people and help their veteran journalists to renew, to learn more, to raise their game, and really stop and consider we need to talk among ourselves more as journalists and say, are we really covering this right? Are we really being journalists?
I'd like to get your thoughts on the role of state media, because we are a state-owned company and we have a primary responsibility as a public service broadcaster, but we're also driven by the profit motive as well. And sometimes that could interfere with our ability to do our job as a public service broadcaster. A few thoughts from you on that conundrum.
Well, you know what the problem is, so now you know how you must compensate. Mm-hmm. You know, you've accurately laid it out. These are the things that I could get in trouble here. I could lose my way. We all have this. We talked about it yesterday at the conference, how government advertising is influencing people. People are trying to make it. And when governments influence advertising and the money, the revenue stream, it makes the owners, or it makes the administrators of a state-owned media company say, let's be a little more favorable towards the government. Let's not be so critical. And that's our job, is to be critical. That's our job, not unfairly, but to examine everything, not to tread softly for some and not for others. One of the biggest problems is what we're seeing around the world, not just here in the Caribbean, but we are seeing some of it in the Caribbean. The oligarchs, the people that have risen up and have accumulated a lot of wealth, are involved in many different industries. They buy a media company because that enables them to be able to pressure a government or reward a government. If I can have that real estate contract that has nothing to do with broadcasting, you're going to have a very good run in the next election, because you're not going to get any criticism from my station. And they use it instead of paying bribes. Why? It's cheaper, and they have that license, the license to print money. And that's why across Eastern Europe, former Soviet countries, we're seeing a lot of these oligarchs, these very wealthy individuals buying up the media.
It's a lot more insidious. We have a breaking news story, because you would know about that, where we're getting unconfirmed reports of the reroute camp being demolished by Army and police officers. We're trying to establish contact and get an update on that story as we continue to carry on our conversation with veteran, world-renowned journalist Jim Clancy. Let's talk about the lessons all journalists should learn, all media houses should learn from News Corps and what's happening in the UK.
Well, it's a classic case of influence at the top, where the top members of a corporation, a media empire, have influence over the politicians, and the politicians curry favor with someone that controls so much media, television, newsprint, all of this, all across the Atlantic. And they can cast you in a good light or in a not so good light. And you see right at the top, they pursued contacts. The Murdoch Empire was very aware of its influence, very aware of the clout that it had within the British government, and so too was the British government, that with the right favors they might be able to push things along in favor of the media empire and reap some rewards out of it.
But blatant breaking of the law, bribery, all those issues confront the news media, because these issues now hit at the very credibility. When you're breaking the law and you're offering bribes to stories, when you have police officers on your payroll, those are serious issues confronting any news.
Sure.
news
You completely abandoned the world of journalism. You are now into media politics, and sadly, how far they went. I mean, hacking the phones of missing little girls to find out what the parents are saying. All of these kinds of things, and just going after people, getting the inside story by using eavesdropping, becoming their own secret service, if you will, or intelligence agency. And in doing so, at every turn, breaking the laws of privacy. If journalists and journalism entities, media companies, media houses, want to support journalism, I mean, you can't go down that road. And I mean, they closed News of the World, I think, probably just to avoid having to pay out more money. They're back. They still are in control. But serious questions have to be asked whether the management, right to the top, is fit to be in that industry. These are public licenses that they have, and they should be accountable to the public.
And how this should influence future broadcast codes and regulations. We're going to take a short break with veteran journalist from CNN, Jim Clancy. We will come back with more. This is First Up on CTV.
It's 7:27 here on First Up, the first stop in your busy day, and we have breaking news coming out of the highway reroute movement. News is that the camp that they have set up has been broken down by police and army forces, accompanied by newly installed National Security Minister Jack Warner. We have on the line with us Shireen Bodai, a member of the movement. Good morning to you, Shireen. Hello, Shireen. Good morning. Okay, we're going to try to get Shireen back, but the information that we have is that the camp has been broken. There was also a site of worship, a place of worship that had been set up at the camp, which was also destroyed. The people involved with the highway reroute movement are, of course, outraged by this latest development and would be expressing a great deal of concern at this move by the newly installed National Security Minister, who, in his previous incarnation as Works and Infrastructure Minister, was pushing very hard for this particular highway development to take place in the Penal-Debe area. We're going to bring you more information as it comes to hand on this story. We're
also getting information that Dr. Kubla Singh has been arrested. We'll have confirmation on that coming up in the next few moments. Right now, we continue our conversation with internationally renowned veteran journalist Jim Clancy. You know it is breaking news.
Yeah.
Got to get the story. Let's talk about the threats facing some aspects of journalism, concern about particular challenges and dangers faced by women exercising their rights to freedom of expression and denouncing gender-specific crimes, and a trend toward, in some jurisdiction, you've traveled the globe following stories, sometimes in dangerous situations, and the threat now facing some journalists in the dispensation of their duties.
Well, journalists are under threat like almost never before, and it's spreading. We talked this week, the UN Rapporteur for freedom of expression laid it out this week, a fascinating way of looking at this. Why are people turning on the journalists, the narco-traffickers, and all these other people? And he said, his name is Frank LaRue, and he said, don't look beyond the internet. The internet's been a wonderful tool for journalism, but it's also made authoritarian leaders and narco-traffickers, criminal groups, very concerned. They can't control the flow of information anymore. They can't stop it from coming across their borders. They can't just shut off the internet because people have learned to get around all of that. And they're feeling very vulnerable, and they may be turning around and striking out at the very people, the very source of what they perceive to be their problems, what they perceive to be the threat against them. This applies to women, certainly. We see them as increased victims. Look at the poor journalists in Mexico. I mean, they wake up one morning. The three of us were journalists one day in Mexico. We wake up in the morning and suddenly we're all three war correspondents because the war came to us, into our homeland. And that's what they have faced, especially in these smaller areas, outside of the main cities. Where journalists have some security. But if you're a local reporter in some of these places, you are vulnerable.
But look, let's talk about the issue, and that's talking about the illegal side, and that side attacking journalists around the world. But what about journalists making a difference in perhaps the Middle East, where we're seeing very stringent moves by leaders like Bashar al-Assad to curtail the activities of journalists because they're bringing information out to the world contrary to what the image they're trying to portray of their country. And now the journalists are being targeted by sometimes state forces and trying to, and the state forces are trying to intimidate journalists in the dispensation of their duties to maintain a particular image of the country which may not be the truth.
Yeah, and it goes even further than that. We have evidence, or we have great suspicions that the government actually assassinated journalists to tried to make it look like it was the opposition that did that in order to turn them around and make them think that the government is right. The evidence in Syria is overwhelming. There are two revolutions. There's, first of all, the revolution on the streets against Bashar al-Assad, as you noted. Second, there's a media revolution. These are citizen reporters. These are young people that have braved bullets to go out with nothing but their cell phones or with video cameras. They have learned how to document it, how to hold up a newspaper that has the date on it so that you can know, looking at that videotape, or have reasonable confidence that that's the day that it was shot. And they have put up live streams of these demonstrations. They have defied the government, and they have paid for it with their lives. And international journalists that go in, and we so much in those kinds of situations depend on the local journalists, the local citizen reporters, the local activists for our lives, for our safety. One of my friends, Marie Colvin, went in there, journalist, writer for the Times of London, and lost her life. And I knew her very well, and she was very dedicated to the job. But that's what we face today in so many different areas. That if you're willing to do the story, and she certainly was, I mean, she was ready, she was out. She could have walked across the border into Lebanon. She said, no, this is a story that has to be told, and I'm going to go back in there, and I'm going to tell it. I'll be out in a few days.
Mr. Clancy, I want to go to the issue of the voice, the tone of voice in which stories are told. Yes, we have many more citizen journalists rising up to ensure that the story is told, particularly in troubled areas like Syria. But there is concern that when it comes to certain stories, like the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, that there was a particular voice, and that was the voice of the West that was telling the story, and that we didn't always get a true picture of what was going on. It was told from a particular perspective. How do you respond to that?
Guilty as charged. I mean, if there's anything I regret in my career, it's not having stood up against the war in Iraq and said, wait a minute, what are we doing here? We all knew that Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with September 11th. But we all suspected that he did have weapons of mass destruction because he was trying to hide them. Well, we find out in the end that no, he just wanted his neighbors to think that he had weapons of mass destruction so they would fear him. I mean, that's the only explanation we came up with.
How should journalists respond? And we're going to take a break to cut into this news story. We'll continue our conversation. We have
Vishal
Budai
yes.
on the line now, protester with the Reroute movement. Good morning, Vishal Budai. Thank you for joining us. And first up, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having us.
Good morning.
Yes.
We're hearing reports that the Reroute movement site has been demolished, a place of worship that you had been worshiping every morning has also been demolished, which you term as sacrilege. And Dr. Kublai Singh has been arrested. Can you confirm any of these for us?
Yes, at around 5 o'clock this morning, a group of Army personnel, heavily armed personnel, came, about 30 of them, together with about 1 or 2 police officers. Mr. Colin Parakap and Mr. Jack Warner was present when they came. And at the time, there were about 8 persons in the camp. They called everyone, and we all came down within about 20 minutes. At around 5:30, they started the demolition. The first thing they went for was the prayer rooms. There were 2 prayer rooms at the site. So they went for that first, and they destroyed that completely. They ran through that completely without waiting for us to remove anything. Something like that. Everything was just ran over. All the Jandis, the Murtis, there was a Muslim worship center. That was the first one that went. And then there was a Christian prayer room that went together with the Hindu one.
Has Dr. Kublai Singh been arrested?
Yes, Dr. Kublai Singh came in a bit late because he came from Arima. He put up a fight when they were actually demolishing the camp itself. He was thrown to the ground and dragged out, basically. He put up a fight. He came back again to resist them from going forward. This time they got even worse. They arrested him. They put him in cuffs and they dragged him out.
Vishal, has anyone else been arrested?
No one else has been arrested.
Are the police and army still at the site at this point in time?
Yes. The army is over here right now. All of the army personnel and, as I said, one or two of the policemen were here.
We have reports that the National Security Minister was present with the police and army units. Is he still there?
Mr. Jack Warner left a short while ago. Someone said he came back. I don't know if he actually did come back. But Mr. Colin Paratap and Mr. Jack Warner was here throughout the proceedings, the demolition proceedings.
Vishal, was there any prior warning that the reroute movement should vacate the site?
Well, repeat?
Was there any prior warning from the authorities that the reroute movement should vacate the protest site?
The only warning we got was an informal warning from actually, believe it or not, from within the government. A friend within the government actually gave us a warning that they were coming to destroy our camp. We took that very seriously. Word of that also spread to the unions because they mentioned it on Labor Day as well. But prior to that, they actually private security firm had actually tried to come to demolish, but they found it was too many people at the time. So they didn't destroy it. Yesterday, actually, the army came again to destroy it. They didn't say anything. They just parked up and they waited outside the camp. But they also left again yesterday. But today, for whatever reason, they decided to follow through with the demolition.
Vishal, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. This morning, we just have also information that Minister in the Ministry of National Security, Minister Colin Paratap and Minister Warner will have a press conference at 11 o'clock to elucidate the public on this breaking story. Thank you very much, Mr. Budai. Mr. Clancy, in our final moments, we're talking about the issue of media houses from the West casting events in the Middle East in a particular light, and how individual journalists should respond to sometimes pressure from above to send a particular message across the globe.
We have to be very cautious, and I think the Iraq War has served to make people cautious. When you have respected individuals like the former Secretary of State Colin Powell, making comments that that's the one thing he regrets in his life, is going into the United Nations with false information and laying it out on the table. We have to ask ourselves, what are we doing? We're walking into the arena of public opinion and presenting sometimes false information. And harder questions have to be asked. And it's right if the public holds us accountable for it.
When we as journalists pledge to become members of the Fourth Estate, what are we pledging to do?
We're pledging to serve the public, to let the free flow of information go, to serve the public, to make informed decisions. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, these are the things that uphold all the other freedoms. That's why it's listed as first, when people look at human rights. It's so fundamentally important to all of that. And as important as that is, with it come some privileges and come a lot of responsibilities.
That's a great point in which to end, Jim Clancy. Thank you
very much for joining us this morning.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Keep up the good work, both of you.
Thank you very much. You keep up the inspiration to us. All right, we'll be talking to veteran, world-renowned journalist Jim Clancy from CNN. We will take a short break and continue to monitor that breaking news down at the Reroute Movement site and more right here on First Up. Stay with us.